Hello and welcome to the first devlog of me creating my own game in Unity. So far I haven't decided on a name for the game. It will essentially be a mix between Stardew Valley and Grand Theft Auto. It will include the basic farming mechanics and look of Stardew Valley, but with the shooting and driving mechanics of GTA 5. In this video I cover about 2 weeks of work. First, we'll add some basic controls for our character. I found some sprites on Google and borrowed these. The control manager didn't take too long. I chose to work with forces for the character movement. This will allow us to implement acceleration and deceleration into the character. I also wanted to add a dash or roll to the player, and using forces makes this quite a bit easier. I then wanted the camera to follow the player, but for this there would have to be some stationary objects as a reference. This meant quickly drawing up some tile sprites. They're pretty bad, but we'll change them. Next was implementing the dash. This wasn't at all difficult. I simply set the player speed to a certain percentage of the maximum speed. I also wanted the camera shake effect for when the player dashes. With no help from brackies, I added this and got the camera shaking. In general, I will leave the refining and adding of the game feel towards the end of development, but since I haven't done most of this stuff ever, I wanted to have tried implementing it beforehand. I also got the player sprite direction working by setting the sprites themselves. Later in the video I'll switch to proper animations with some better sprites. I prepared quite a lot before starting development of the game, which means I've got quite a good image of what I want, and I also have a roadmap laid out for at least the beginning stages of development. I added in a quick main menu since I want to implement saving and loading serialization from the start. If I can do this properly, I bet it'll be faster than adding it at the end of development. Next, I wanted to get the car movement working. This meant getting some decent sprites for our game. Sadly, I couldn't find these, so I spent 3 days trying to draw shit while I can't. I did eventually find a solution. I would take a 3D model of a car that I liked and put it into Unity. I could then simply rotate the car in any direction, take a screenshot, convert it into pixel art, scale it down and add it to the game. After adding a script that took the right sprite depending on the angle of the car, this is what the rotation looked like. I then made it so that if the player pressed forward while in the car would go in the direction of the angle, resulting in some decent movement. It still needs a lot of tweaking and changing, since the car turns instantly, there's no velocity gradient and no drifting yet. Next was adding in an option menu. This is quite self-explanatory. While writing the script, I also decided that the next important thing to do would be to change the UI and give it the proper treatment it deserves. Following the option menu, I made quite a lot of progress. I made some new world tiles and started working on the inventory system. This took a lot of time, but it all worked out in the end. It isn't 100% done, but I later used the system I developed in tangent with the farming system, and this all works quite well. I also added saving and a hotbar. It's just that here too the UI desperately needs a change. Down the road I also need to add some smaller functionality such as durability displays for the icons and being able to chop half of a stack of items with one button. The only things that I haven't yet implemented when writing the script are items being dropped on the ground and the player being able to pick these up. Luckily, how I have set up the inventory system will make implementing this a walk in the park. Following the inventory system, I set my sights on getting the world time manager completed. This had to be done before work started on the farming mechanics, since crops need time to grow, which means we'll have to add time. To begin, I tinkered with the Unity URP settings and converted my project. This allows me to easily integrate lighting mechanics into the game. After this, I added a controller script that handled the time in our world. This resulted in a basic day and night cycle. I still need to change this a little bit, since in the real world the sun doesn't immediately start shining after midnight. You essentially have a small window in which it stays dark. This can be fixed by implementing dawn and dusk times and having them change depending on the season. Next, I wanted to add some more life to the world and decided to add some trees. I played around with the Pixel Lab AI generator for this, and oh boy, did this work. In total I got about 14 different good looking tree sprites, which I then added to the game. I made a quick script that changes the opacity of the sprite when the player is behind the tree. After adding trees to the game, I would now spend the next 2 days implementing farming mechanics into our game. I managed the farming by creating a so-called farm box. Every farm box will have a grid of farm tiles under its control that it can manage and change, etc. After I got the basic properties set, the height of the tiles, position, etc. and after I got the sprites, I could now, by clicking a tile, plow it and make it ready for growing crops. After implementing this, I wanted the tiles to connect. I didn't know this would take this long, but after a long time I managed to get it working. Now finally, after a solid 10 days, I got the first crop growing. In the end, this is where we are at. We can load in the game, plow some tiles, water them using a silver flail, plant some seeds, skip some days, and eventually harvest the crops. Everything is correctly saved and loaded in. For the next devlog, I will be implementing the shooting mechanics. I assume these will be taking up quite some time as well. I will also be seriously revamping the UI and trying to get the game looking good. Thanks so much for watching this video and good